nodded in thanks, but beyond the statues, that curtains of lianas, you see, he pointed. Fred followed his hand and saw at the far end of the city square, falling from the wall behind the statues, a great swathe of tangling creepers. They nodded. You don't go anywhere near there. Do you understand? That is my private space. Con tried to speak, but only a strangled burr came out. We understand, said Lila. I mean it. Keep your word, or I'll cut off your ears and give them to the vulture to wear as a hat. Don't, wailed Max. He put his hands over his ears. I don't like him. Shh, Max, said Lila. He doesn't mean it. Fred looked at the man. He was fairly sure Lila was right, but it seemed risky to assure of a man who used teeth for buttons that he was joking. Max tugged at the man's trousers. What time do we eat? The man looked down at him, baffled. Whenever you want. Oh, but we mean whenever suits you, said Con. Her voice was croaky, but she looked relieved that it had started working again. You eat whenever you catch and cook something. That's usually how it works, unless you don't catch anything. But don't you? You're the adult. I'm an adult, certainly. Look, there are berries. There may be some bananas on the trees in the west corner, if they weren't eaten by monkeys in the night, and you can hunt. But, said Con, you're the grown-up. Her voice had truly come back now, and she scolded. Grown-ups cook for children. Those are the rules. That's how it always has been done. The man seemed to be losing patience. My dear, he crouched in front of her, dangerously close. Which aspect of this, he waved his hand at the stone pillars, at his scaly shoes, at the vulture, makes you think I would care how things have always been done? But that isn't how it works in the real world. This is the real world. He thumped his knuckles on the stone floor. This, here, the real world is where you feel. Most real. But who are, said Fred. But please, said Lila. But don't you, said Con. All three reached out as if to grab him. Good Lord, said the man. It's like watching a dog eat a bee. You have 6 hands between you, or 8 if you count the small one trying to eat a dragonfly. Mac, said Lila, stop that. Do you at least have knives? The man asked. We have one between us, said Fred. We found it. It didn't seem the right moment to explain that technically the knife almost certainly belonged to this tall, dark, unexpectedly dressed stranger. He might demand they give it back. The man sighed. I'll give you each a flint. Then you can hunt at least. He crossed to another stump of tree trunk, lifted a small boulder off its top, and fished out something from the hollow space within. Here, they're already sharpened. He handed them each a stone expertly chiselled to the size of a large arrowhead. Fred tested the edge with his thumb. It bit into his skin, and a drop of blood ballooned out. The man raised his eyebrows. You can use banana leaves as bandages. If you lose any fingers worth eating, give them to the vulture. He handed a stone to Max. There you are, young Cacophony. That one's the sharpest. Max is too young for knives, said Lila. She tried to take it from her brother, but he jerked away and held both hands behind his back. Is he? How do you know? Said the man. He sounded interested. It's just a fact. People don't give little boys knives. I feel fairly sure I was given a knife at a young age, and I turned out perfectly normal. Fred looked at the buttons on the man's shirt. They glinted white and sharp in the sun. He said nothing. The man sighed. It's getting late, he said. You can have something from my own stores, but just tonight. Don't think it's going to be routine. You'll have to hunt for yourselves. All 4 let out deep sighs of relief. The man strode back to the hollowed-out trunk and bent to a pile of stones next to it. Up close, they seemed to be arranged into something more definite than a pile. a rectangle with wide slabs across the top. The man lifted two of the slabs, reached in and brought out the body of a bird, plucked but ungutted. "Kara kara," he said. He dropped it into Fred's hand. It was cool and clammy. "They're common as rats here." "Thank you. Could you tell us how to gut it?" Fred asked tentatively. "With the flints, boy." "But how's the best way, sir?" he added, just in case. "When the first man learnt to cook he did so without recipe books. He worked it out. You work it out." They all four stared at him. He sighed. "Cut along the stomach, scoop out anything that looks too detailed, and cook the rest. As a rule of thumb, with innards, if it would take more than one colour to draw it, don't eat it. So, kidneys are fine, all reddish brown. Intestines, less so, unless you're feeling exceptionally brave. But, just quickly before you go, how do we cook it?" said Lila. "With fire." He smiled a half smile. "Or that one, the blonde one wearing her face like a weapon in a barroom brawl, could try to cook it by glaring at it." "Wait, please, just a second." Fred made a last effort as the man turned to go. "Who are you? What do we call you? What is this place? How did you get here? Are you an explorer? Do you live here? Are you planning to help us? We need to know." Fred thought of all the explorers he'd read about. There were so many who had strode into the jungle and never reappeared. Percy Fawcett and his son Jack, Rayleigh Rimmel, Christopher McLaren. He tried to remember what the photographs in the newspaper had looked like. The man turned to face Fred full on. His face shifted from wry to something darker and harder to trace. "I'm a bush pilot, not an explorer. I used to ferry supplies back and forth from the smaller towns to Manus. I crashed here some time ago." "What happened to your plane?" "What happened to yours?" he countered. "It burnt," said Fred. The man nodded. "Exactly so." "And your name?" "I'm Fred, and that's Lila and Con and Max." A look as blank as an iron wall came down over the man's face. "I'm not interested in names. This is the Amazon jungle, not the Travellers' Club on Pall Mall." "But what do we say then?" Con asked. "I mean, if we need your attention." His eyebrows went up so high they nudged at his hairline. "You don't," he said, and turned away. He strode across the square, his shoulders hunched, heading towards the place where the vines grew into an impenetrable curtain. He pushed past some branches and disappeared. His footsteps, despite the limp, were astonishingly silent. "You scared him off," Max said to Con, his voice full of accusation. "It wasn't just me. We all did," said Con, "and technically I think we annoyed him off." "I didn't know," said Lila, "that asking someone's name would be so controversial." "I know what we call him," said Max. He beamed up at them proudly. "We call him the Explorer." "But he just said he's not one," said Con, exasperated. "Weren't you listening?" "He has an explorer's hat," said Max, "and a vulture, so there."